Hi, this is Hans from Rfm, from Request for Music. In this video, I'll be going over Rfm R, which is the software for that I created to randomize patches or randomize sounds for Synclavier. So first of all, let's boot the program. I've got it here in a folder, so just let's start it. And we'll have a look at how it works and what you can do to get sort of predictable sounds out of it. So here we have the program, and as you can see, there are a couple of blocks within the software. First of all, here on the top left, I've got the number of partials that you can choose, and if you select the drop-down menu, you see that you have the option of creating 1 to 12 partials. It's normally standard set at one partial, which means that you create one layer of sound within Synclavier-V. Next thing is the presets, and the presets are just very simple patches for Synclavier that you can use to create or to have sort of a standard to work from when you're going to randomize. And the stuff that you can use are the simple sine, syn bass, syn brass, a pad, a lead sound, a piano, some synthesizer effects, or random basic. And apart from that, on the next one, I've got the random range, and you see it's set to 0%. And if I do recalculate, actually all of these light blue blocks will be gone, because what it does then is, depending on the preset that you use, you see those lines and you see those you see that the signs on top, and actually the triangle waves show you what the setting for a standard sine would be, because if I take any of the other presets, you'll see that the lines are actually moved to a different location within those sliders. And that means that for a syn bass, those blue lines indicate the settings for instance, attack, decay, and so on, and for FM mod, for instance, within such a patch. So if you would go over all of these, you see that those settings change. So a syn brass, for instance, has more attack for both the carrier and the modulator. And if I go into syn lead, it'll probably have hardly any attack, whereas it will have more sustain and not too much release, because you want the sound to stick with you when you press a key and hold a key. So that's the kind of settings that you do as a basis from which you're going to randomize. Then in this block here on the right top, you can set the number of patches from 1 up to 25 if you want it, so that's a slider. And you can export all different patches that way. Underneath, we have the carrier envelopes, for which you have the same settings as you have within Synclavier itself. So you've got delay, attack, decay, peak level, sustain, and release. And you've got the same kind of settings for the modulator, of course. Then I've got the partial settings, for which I can set the volume, the pan, tuning, that's fine tuning, transpose, which is coarse tuning, of course, of octave, for which you can set the basic frequency for one partial, the chorus fine, and the chorus coarse value. Next to that, I've got the waves that you can choose, because I've created several sort of presets for the harmonics within Synclavier. So the standard setting is just a sine, just having that first harmonic on, but I've changed some settings so I could create an octave or a triangle or a saw or a rounded saw, and all of the other values in there that you can choose to create sort of a basic partial setting for all of the harmonics. And you can set that for both the carrier and the modulator, and randomize that if you wanted to, because the little squares here and are check marks, like it's here, where you can check if such a setting or all of those settings will be randomized. Underneath the modulator envelope, right from that, the modulator with the FM mod signal, so the strength of that, the strength of the FM ratio fine, and the coarse FM ratio settings. Those two values should be handled very cautiously, because if you change it to a higher setting, then it will be useful as an effects probably, but not so much in a melodic content. Apart from that, I've got the effect settings, and that goes from the settings that I created, because in the simple sine wave I already have some effects in there, like chorus, reverb, and delay, to not have the real standard default sine waves, and we'll have a look at that later. Apart from that, vibrato and portamento that you can also set. So normally what I do is I start off at a standard value and either have the program randomize it for me by changing this level of randomization and do a recalculate, and the lower the value is, the more it keeps or it sticks with the original values of the presets. And apart from that, again, as I said, if I normally do a 0% recalculation, you can see that all the values are standard. So that also means that if I want to get rid of these values, where I said that a ratio and a ratio fine will sort of render the the sound that you create, or the patch that you create with it, may be unusable. So if I now set these higher up and do a recalculate, you see that those are left at their original settings. Let's first of all, because it's quite important that you also know what you can do within Synclavier, so have a look at that. So let's put that up, Synclavier, and have that here as well. I'll drag this to the side a bit. There we have the Synclavier. Draw that downwards a bit and click to the side. Okay, there we have it. So first of all, I want to go over some of the waves. I created a bank that that holds. Let me see where I've got it. In my banks, I have a bank called Rfm R basic, which holds the basic values like that sine wave and an octave with a sine, triangle sine, saw sine, and so on. And that means that the first name is the carrier setting for the wave, and the other one is the wave setting for the harmonic. So if I would go over that, first of all, look at the sine wave, of course, and switch out of this and have a listen. And you'll see that if I go into my screen, actually within the FX master, that's where the difference is with a standard wave. So I've got a reverb, a basic reverb setting, basic chorus setting, and a basic delay setting, just to give it an overall more pleasing sound than you would normally have. Something like that. So that sounds good, I guess. And looking at the engine, of course, within Synclavier itself, I've got my carrier on the left, I've got my modulator on the right, and these are all the harmonics involved within such a wave. And then apart from that, there's timeline stuff in at the top, which I don't randomize within within a randomized software. There was just no way of getting it to handle that. The things that I do randomize, however, as you've seen, I do all of the kind of stuff that you have in the envelopes. So that means that if you look at the envelopes, I've got the settings for the attack, decay, sustain, release, and as the settings as you have here. So the delay, attack, peak, decay, sustain, and release. I've got that for both carrier envelope. On the partial side itself, I'm doing some stuff with the volume, the pan, the tuning, transpose, octave, chorus, and that kind of stuff. Actually, the chorus fine, F mod, and that kind of stuff is separated here. So I've got the F mod, FM ratio, and FM ratio fine, and under effects, sorry, I've got the chorus on the partial side of things on top. So those are the settings that you work with. And obviously it means that if you have a sound like this and you add harmonics to it, it will change the sound accordingly. And as this is pretty unpredictable normally, I've created a couple of sounds in there. So the next one, for instance, is that I've created one with where I use the octaves from the sine wave. So now if you so I've done something like this where you see all of those harmonics. So those are the octaves. So it means that if you now use one of those drawbars, so to speak, because you can compare it to that. You can set that level. Next one would be a triangle wave where you've got different relationships in level to get that sound. Next one would be a sawtooth. Next one, a rounded saw. Next one would be a pulse sine. And obviously you also see sort of an interpretation of how the harmonics or what the harmonics would add up to if you would look at it at an oscilloscope. It's not really that close actually, because if you look at the sawtooth, saw sine, it looks like this here, but this is sort of a calculated thing. But if you would really look at an oscilloscope, it would look different. It's not really very good sawtooth, but it does follow the way how the relationship should work within a synclavier or within harmonics, within additive synthesis, because that's what we're working with. Let's go on. Pulse sine, I've got a block sine, and a random sine, which is completely randomized. So you've got a very weird way of how all of those harmonics interact. And then I've got some other stuff like introducing some noise into the sine, and that in different levels. And last part is sort of an inversed sawtooth that is almost, because actually this keeps it from going there, but you need the fundamental harmonic to give it some sound. Yeah, so indeed that's the sort of waves that you could work with. So that means that if I go into this, what I would normally do is mostly I don't even use a random range, but I want to define for myself what the different ranges are. So that would mean if I start off with a simple sine wave, for instance, or no, let me take the, let's take the simple sine wave indeed. If I wanted it to sound more like a pad, I would need more attack. And I can actually drag within such an area to set the lower and top bottoms of the area that I wanted to have the randomization be calculated in. So that would mean that if I take something like this, it will be within 0 up to maybe 20 or 25% or something from the normal attack. So to get sort of an estimated guess of what I'm doing, that's how I go about it. So if I wanted to create a pad, for instance, I would take longer attacks into account probably for both the carrier and for the modulator. So do something like this. I will probably need a longer decay as well. So I might do something like this, higher settings for both. I'll leave the peak alone because that's where it's the ending level of the attack and starting level of decay. And I might use a lower sustain, so it will have something to go back to, unless I want my my keys to keep their level as long as I keep my keys pressed on my keyboard. So I could do it on that way in the carrier, so it would drop down to a certain level on the sustain, and I'll probably want a longer or medium to longer release. I could have a higher sustain, so the sound which is driving my carrier will indeed do a longer sustain and have a longer release on that as well. I might leave the volume. I'm only creating one partial, so I'll leave the volume alone. I'll leave the pan alone and the tuning, because actually I only use those kind of things when I'm creating multiple partials within one patch, because then I want a certain offset in tuning between those partials and maybe an offset in pan as well. So I leave these alone, and I could, for instance, do something to the chorus if I wanted some sort of a thicker sound, but mostly I use this as sort of a basis for slight further editing within Synclavier. So I'll leave that alone. If I would leave the FM mod at 0 as it is now, I would just have a sine wave. So I'd probably put it the stuff up a bit, so it would create somewhere in this area. So this is probably where it starts to sound, where it starts to affect the sort of filtery sound of the Synclavier. Next, these effects, I'll leave them as they are. I'll leave those as they are. The only thing is I'm going to change it from a sine wave to a sine plus 20% noise, so I can change that. I don't have this set because then it's going to randomize it itself, so it leaves it like is now. I have the percentage at 0, but it still looks at all of those values. So let's just export. When I do the export, it actually came into this folder. As you can see the time set. It's 9 o'clock on a Sunday morning here. It's got this name, rsine 2021, etc. So now if I go into Synclavier and do an import on that sound, I obviously have to set it into that folder, which is here. I see it on top. I've got this to date modified so that the newest one will get on top, so it's easier to find there. Just double click and you see that it's importing here, and as soon as it's finished, it asks me to press OK. So now I have to look at where it came. I have already created files that it uses, and let me see which one was it. It was the 0025. So that means that if I'm going to look here, this is looking at the types of all of these things, and when I export a patch from my RFM software, it uses these kind of patches, sort of types. The Rfm R sine with the underscores, RFMs are random or lead or brass or bass. So it should be within this Rfm R sine thing, and I can see from the date it's 2021-08, 15th of August, and I've created it at somewhere around 9 o'clock, and it uses milliseconds around above that for the name. So I can click on that, and as soon as I have that clicked, it has it selected. And now if I create new ones and import those, I can actually just use the up and down arrows to go about this. So let's listen to what it sounds like. So it sounds like that, and if I look at the envelope, you see that there's indeed quite a long amplitude and harmonic envelope in it and attack in it. So if I wanted to change that, obviously it can do that, but if I want to recalculate stuff, I would probably maybe lower the value for the carrier, up this, and let's now, instead of this, because it didn't sound too bad, I could actually lower this probably because I wanted slightly less noise in the sound. So I could do something like this, and let's add a couple of partials to it. So and just to see that indeed, if I look in the mixer, you can see there's only one level and all of the other partials are not set. So we're going to do that now by going into the randomize program, go into the number of partials, use 4 partials, and it's going to use those values to set all of those. So now let's do something to the panning, do something to the tuning as well. I don't want it to detune too much, so I just drag a little bit on this, and yeah, leave the rest as is and just export. So click on export, and you'll see it add up here on top. Number 03 is 56, so let's import the sound. It has done that. Come on. It doesn't want to go on top anymore. No idea why not. Hang on one sec. Still importing. There was something getting in. It gets stuck. There was some kind of strange message on the program. I'll reset the program for now. Don't know exactly what happened, but somehow Synclavier itself got stuck. So I'll do it again. Start it up again. Good to see that that happens. Not that it happens, but it's not quite sure what happened. I got a message on my phone saying that there was something importing in the in my Mac. So apparently something went wrong there. Anyway, it should be imported. So let's do it again just to be sure. First, go back to this, import the presets. Go back into my Rfm R, double click. It's done it. Okay. And go into the sound. So now and have a look at what the sound looks like if I go into the screen, and you see if I go into the mixer that I've got indeed 4 partials set. I see the pan. It has been, of course, I can't predict where the pan is going to end. Most of the time I want this set a bit different. I probably want to have a counterpart for this on the other side, and for that on the other side as well. The settings for the FM, as you see, I didn't do anything to fine or FM ratio. Looking back at the envelope, you see that now the envelopes is shorter for a couple of them. And since there was an option to set it very short, it did on one of those, as you can see. So if I solo this out, this will be very short going down, but obviously I could drag that longer if I wanted. So something like that. And of course I could have a look at all of the settings. Stuff that I also don't randomize are the key dynamics, so I'm not going into where it's going to be set within the keyboard, because obviously you could actually set the partial to a different part of your keyboard only, so you can have sort of split keyboard that way by defining an area for one or different partials anyway, and because all of those sound different. So I've got, if I solo this, so now take the next one, and the last one. They sound a bit different, and I could have it different even more, because the things that I could change are stuff like the octave. And just to have a look at what something like that does, if I just mute out those and only take I could have done that obviously as well. Just take the top partial. If I do something like this, the sound obviously is created by these harmonics that are changed. So if I lower these values, it will have less noise than it had. The other things that are affected, of course, within Synclavier is doing the modulation, because this decides how much of that second sound is going into to the first harmonic to drive it. And apart from that, I've got the ratios, and that's why I say that obviously the ratio is not something that you might want to change too much. You could do the fine-tuning of that ratio to do a bit to create some more sort of chorus. On the other hand, you could do the chorus as well. If I would drive this a bit, the chorus itself is doubling the sound. But again, if I have that on this kind of value, but I change the fine-tuning, then it has some sort of chorus doubling. So I could use that kind of effect within the program. So if I look back at Rfm R, I could actually do some of the chorus fine on this part, especially if I have multiple partials. So now I have the detuning, I have this, maybe I set another kind of a wave to it. So I take the saw around, for instance, to do this. Still use the 4 partials. I'm still only looking at the simple sine that I use. So I do this, and yeah, let's keep it at that, or do a slight difference within the fine-tuning of the FM ratio, and I keep to stick with that line a bit. So let's just create a new one, and when exporting it does that, and as soon as the red bar is there, it should at least be here, and you see that it is. So 9, 8, 9, 10, number 11, go back into Synclavier, do an import, and unfortunately I can't create the full banks within my program. They just haven't given me the data to do that. So double click the top one, so it will be imported. So it's working, imported successfully, and okay, and it should be the next one in line now, number 011, which it was, number 011. So there we are. So that way we've got those settings. This is the volume, these are the pans that it's now created. As you can see, there's a slight difference between the fine tunings. FM mod has been the same, fine tuning for chorus has changed. Let's do some stuff to the octaves, because the octaves can easily be changed. Transposing, of course, will be a mess. If I get that, so I probably don't want that, because if I set a setting at a specific point here, it's going to to create everything between those lines, unless I would exactly know where a specific transposition would be, because obviously you can also click in a certain area to do that. Let's go back to a basic and just redefine kind of the stuff. So this is the standard sine wave setting for the octave, but it means that if I do something like this, it will also take lower octaves for that. So let's go back, do some, or no, let's create more of a keyboard kind of sound. So I'll do a very short attack on this, and do a short attack on this as well, because maybe I want some how do I say that? Yeah, a slight attack to sort of filter coming in. I'll use some decay, obviously, and I use a low sustain on both, and the same kind of thing here, and I'll do some release, and I want some FM mod. I want a different sound, but not just for the carrier, but I also want a different sound for the other one. Let's also take the saw around, and I've got the octave set, and I'll do the pan, and I do slight tuning something, and I do this slight chorus, and I could do the slight ratio fine. Let's keep it as close as I can to that middle line. For partials, well, let's just go what it comes up with. So I create it, and as soon as the red bar is there, it should be on top. As you see, 913, number 21. Let's go in here, do the import, double click the sound that I did. I actually think that what went wrong earlier is that I just didn't double click the sound, so I was actually just waiting. Press OK, and the next one should be in line again, number 21. There we are. So. I did a decay very short, so I could look at what I wanted, because decays indeed are pretty short now between all of those. Because actually it's about something like this, so I'd probably have to up the delay for all of them. I could of course do that now by shift selecting those and dial it up, and you can hear the difference. So it's what I would need to do is change a longer decay setting and probably a longer release setting as well. If I would do the same for these, since I've shift selected all of them, it's going to do that on all. So now let's get back into Rfm R. So I need longer decays, slightly, maybe something like this on both modulator and carrier, and longer releases. So let's do something like this and export again. Look at where it comes. It's already there, 07. So go into import again, import, take the newest sound, 07, importing, please wait, and as soon as it's finished, get back and press the OK button, and then I go down, and you see 07 is the new one. So now I guess that the ratio or the modulation is a bit too deep. So if I went into a mixer, I see the FM mod is, well, higher for some values. So I could either lower the ones that I wanted, and of course I could do it for all. And you see that indeed I've got more octaves in the sound now. But so that means that if I have to dial that back, I probably want to dial back the amount of modulation in here. So I could do something like that. The coarse setting is, or the octave setting is not too bad. I see that I've got a 110 in there as well and a 440. So if I want to lower that, I'd probably have to get a slightly lower range for that. Let's go even further than this. Let's just dial the full 12 of those in there. This wasn't too bad. The setting, again, the FM mod is what drives a sound more unusable by driving the carrier with the envelope, of course. So just stick to something like this. Export, look at what it comes up with. We've already got number 57. So let's go in here, do an import, and take number 57, wait until it is loaded, and as soon as it did, press the OK. I can go back to the lower one, and then I've got something like this. So, and then if I wanted something different from this, if I wanted to have it sharper, say, or things like that, or just actually a bit softer, I could obviously change the sound, because all of the waves that I use define how it sounds. I've got a carrier of a sawtooth being modulated by a sawtooth. So let's change this to just a sine. Let's create more length into decay, set a shorter range so it has more decay in there. Still not too much sustain. I use the rounded one here, and I use the same settings for the rest. And let's just see what it comes up with. Export. Look at the sound, number 22 came up with that. Do an import to get that number to double click until it comes up with the OK setting. OK. And let's go down to that one. So and of course, if that's okay with me, and I just wanted a couple of different settings, because even a new one, if I just export with the settings again, it will come up with a sound which could be different from the one that I had just now. Got 900 now, so let's import that one, double click that 900, and just listen to differences between those, because there could be, but it depends on the level of randomization. So let's go into this 900 one. There's slight differences, and that is slight. That's because there's obviously the FM mod is the thing that really drives the sort of sound. So if I would go really berserk and do it somewhere up here and export, it will definitely be a very strange sound. And if I would say that I want more of a tuning difference between the partial, it's going to, because I use 12 partials, it's going to mess stuff up. If I would do the same thing with the FM ratio, for instance, it would do that as well. If I want to have unpredictable sounds and more more differences between all of those partials, I could even do something like this and just really go berserk, because it will change all of these settings, obviously. So I could do stuff like this and it will become very unpredictable, and because it even uses those values in between the partials, it's going to make a mess. It's going to mess stuff up. But let's just have a look and let's just see what it does. So do an export on one sound first, and let's see, it has created 048. Go back, import number 048. Come on, importing. Okay, click down. Oops, I'm looking at the wrong one. Let's look where it went. Still, let's see. Something went wrong in the way that it didn't find it. So let's have a look where it came up. Oh, 40. It's here. It is there. No idea. So now you hear that it's indeed messy. I'm just clicking one, or just pressing one key, right? So looking at the mixer, I do see that I've got 12 partials, and let's just go over them. So I've got this, which is very short. Looking at the envelope, you see it's a very short one, because I'd set it, or I've given it a really large range, so it can easily mess stuff up. So looking back at the mixer, first of all, this was the sound for this. Let's go to the next one. I'm just going to press the same key all the time. So this is the next one. Let's go to the next. And because of the of the envelopes being lower, set to a lower sustain, it's also a difference between volume between those. Next one. Next one. Next one. And you see that there's indeed a difference. It's going from 880 to 440 to 220. So that depends. of the setting as well. So actually we've got 12 separate synthesizers at the moment. Oops. And obviously, if I would have left some of the settings where they originally were by leaving the frequency modulation not that high but lower, leave the fine-tuning of this alone, leave the fine-tuning of that alone, of the chorus and so on, it would become more of a predictable and usable sound. One final thing is that let's get back into to recalculate and go back to the sine wave and have some sort of a starting point. Let's just take a different kind of wave, the random wave, which is going to redefine the harmonics each time. So, and actually I could instead use one of those other presets, because if I go into piano, it has a certain settings for all these levels, which also includes a higher chorus level for the sound. So if I would just create this for once, do an export, and it does it on all 12 levels, or sorry, on all 12 partials. So that means that if I select this number 36 on top, import that, import number 36, and press OK. Let's see if it can find it now. There's something, it went into another bank or something. I'm not quite sure where it goes now. 36, where is it? Can't find it myself. That's not nice. It has to do with the way Synclavier is using those settings. Otherwise. Let's see, there it is, number 36. Again, it's sometimes the system, I'm not too fond of what they've done to the preset system of Synclavier, but actually, so I've got, and because I did set this to random sound, still, if I look at the engine, all of the partials will be different for those harmonics. So that's why it still doesn't sound too much like a piano. On the other hand, it does indeed do something. Let's switch to. And if I will go over them, then again, use a solo for this, solo for that. Well, so all of them sound different, and if I wanted to have a larger difference between those, again, I could use a setting like this and maybe use a lower volume, or a lower sustain rate or some stuff like that on the second mod or on the modulator itself, to change the way the different sounds would be handled. And I could, for instance, do something like the pan, which I wanted to have a larger difference on between all of those partials. I could do this slight tuning stuff again, maybe even do something to the chorus, maybe even something a bit to the FM ratio, Let's set this back to a sine wave, and let's set this back to a triangle wave to not have that sharp or harsh sound. And let's create one with 12 partials again. So export, let's have a look. It's created number 20 in here. So that's, and again, the name of the file is the name of the preset that I use. So that's S-Piano, and it's got 2021, the year, 08, the date, or the month, 15, the date, and then 09, 28, which is the time itself, and then a number of milliseconds in between. So that's what gives you the difference between all of those sounds. So let's get back into to this. Look for the imports, look for the proper sound, S-Piano. And since that also creates a different type, it did indeed come up within the other one, so within another type bank that I have, because now it should be within S-Piano, and that's indeed where it is. Number 20, 28, 20, as you can see, 2021, 08, 15, 09, 28, 20. So I've got that selected. So that's what the sound is like. And looking at all of the partials, it has all of the volumes at the same setting. It has those pans. There's a slight detuning between all of them. There's a slight fine-tuning for the chorus, slight fine-tuning for all of the ratios. And then again, if I would set those and just go over those a bit, and I would probably do that with panning as well, say that I wanted that one there, and most of the time I do something like that, and sort of cross mix all of the kind of values that I have, so I have more of a wider sound. Let's put the level down a bit. I'm using a very small controller now. I'm not in front of my normal keyboard, so that's why it sounds a bit more weird. I didn't change anything to the octaves, but obviously I could have done that. I hope that gives more of an idea of what you can do with Rfm R, because it's you should think of it as a way to give you some material to work with better or easier, because it can come up with any amount of exports. As you've seen, I've got a couple of them in here, but if I wanted more material, I would just press on export, and it's going to do that now. It's going to run, and it's actually creating them, and you see them coming up because it's going through the list, and it has to randomize all of them. So it takes its time, and well, you see all of those values coming up. So afterwards, you can just import them into to Synclavier. I hope that, again, that it gives more of an impression of what you can do with the program and how to handle it. And I hope that it'll give you great sounds as a starting point. And yeah, so that's it for now. Thanks a lot. Cheers. Bye-bye.